The starship drifted through the inky void, its hull a testament to countless journeys and narrow escapes. Patches of silvered alloy marked previous repairs, each one a story of survival etched into metal and memory. To the untrained eye, it might have looked like a salvage vessel on its last legs. To those who understood the nuances of interstellar travel, it was something far more remarkable. Commander Krulax of the Zorn exploration vessel watched the incoming craft with a mixture of curiosity and barely concealed disdain. His species had long since mastered the art of perfect technological integration. Every system, every component of their ships functioned with mathematical precision. Efficiency was not just a goal, it was a religion. "Scan the vessel," he instructed his junior officer, a young Zorn whose neural tentacles pulsed with anticipation of discovery. The scan results projected themselves across the holographic display, causing a ripple of amusement among the bridge crew. The human ship's energy signatures were erratic. Its shield modulation appeared almost random, lacking the smooth quantum state harmonics that defined advanced civilizations. Hull integrity showed multiple repair points, each seemingly implemented with whatever materials were available. "Fascinating," muttered Krulax, his primary communication node vibrating with barely contained laughter. Another primitive species thinking they can navigate the galactic expanse. The communication systems crackled to life. Instead of the expected sophisticated quantum-encrypted transmission, a voice emerged. Human, rough, carrying an accent that spoke of multiple planetary origins. "Zorn exploration vessel, this is Independent Research Ship Horizon. We request standard diplomatic exchange protocols." Senior Navigator Plexka leaned closer to the communication interface, her sensory tendrils twitching with anticipation of potential mockery. The human language translation algorithms worked overtime, converting the spoken words into precise Zorn communication patterns. Independent research. Krulax's secondary communication node pulsed with derision. "We have entire planetary research networks that process more data in a microsecond than this vessel could collect in a decade." Yet something about the transmission intrigued him. The voice carried a confidence that seemed disproportionate to the vessel's apparent technological limitations. There was no tremor of fear, no hint of subservience that typically characterized first contact scenarios with less developed species. The Horizon's external cameras began transmitting. The bridge crew watched as the camera feed revealed the ship's interior, a space that defied their understanding of vessel design. Where Zorn ships were sleek, modular, and perfectly organized, this human vessel looked like a living organism. Cables ran in paths that seemed to defy engineering logic. Repair stations looked more like workshops, with tools hanging from magnetic strips and holographic displays showing complex, hand-drawn schematics. Most intriguing was the crew itself. Instead of the uniform neural-linked units expected of an advanced species, humans moved with individual purpose. Some worked on technical systems, others appeared to be engaged in what looked like recreational activities. A group played what seemed to be a complex board game near one of the primary navigation terminals. "They're playing games near critical ship systems," Navigator Plexka observed, her tone a mixture of disbelief and emerging curiosity. Krulax found himself leaning forward. The humans moved with an organic chaos that challenged everything he understood about efficient space travel. Their movements suggested a deep, almost instinctive understanding of their environment that transcended standard technological protocols. The communication channel remained open, waiting for the Zorn response. Somewhere in that waiting silence lay a challenge, an invitation to understand something beyond pure technological capability. "Prepare standard first contact protocols," Krulax instructed, his earlier amusement giving way to something closer to genuine interest. "But be ready for anything." Little did the Zorn know, anything was precisely what humanity specialized in delivering. The diplomatic exchange chamber gleamed with the Zorn Confederation's trademark precision. Crystalline walls shifted with holographic data streams, each surface a testament to technological perfection. Commander Krillak sat at the center of the chamber, his neural appendages carefully arranged to convey both authority and calculation. Across from him, a single human representative stood out like a brushstroke of chaos on a mathematically perfect canvas. Sergeant Elena Rodriguez carried herself with a quiet confidence that seemed to defy the sterile environment. Her uniform was practical, showing signs of multiple repairs, each patch telling a story of survival and adaptation. "We propose a standard first contact evaluation," Krillak transmitted, his communication nodes pulsing with a rhythm that translated to clinical precision. A simulated conflict scenario to assess comparative technological and strategic capabilities. Rodriguez's eyebrow raised slightly, a micro-expression that spoke volumes to those who knew how to read human subtleties. The Zorn believed they were extending a standard galactic protocol. What they didn't understand was that humans sought every challenge as an opportunity for something far more complex than a simple assessment. The holographic display began to materialize, showing a barren moon located in a contested sector of the galactic rim. Geological scans revealed a terrain of extreme complexity, shifting electromagnetic fields, unpredictable gravitational anomalies, and environmental conditions that would challenge even the most advanced combat systems. "Your species will select a tactical unit," Krillak continued, "to demonstrate strategic capabilities. We expect a standard neural-linked combat team consistent with emerging galactic protocols." A moment of silence filled the chamber. The Zorn delegation exchanged neural signals, their collective consciousness anticipating a predictable response. Standard procedure dictated a full tactical unit, carefully selected and quantum-linked for maximum efficiency. Rodriguez's response was anything but standard. "I'll represent humanity," she said simply, her voice carrying a calm that seemed to catch the entire Zorn delegation off guard. The translation algorithms worked overtime, converting her words into precise communication patterns. A single representative. Against the Zorn's most advanced tactical unit. It defied every known protocol of interspecies military engagement. Senior strategist Plexka's neural tendrils began to pulse with what could only be described as confusion. The human's proposal violated every known strategic approach. A single operator against a full neural-linked tactical unit. It was mathematically impossible. Yet there was something in Rodriguez's posture that suggested she knew exactly what she was doing. The Zorn data analysts began running simulations. Billions of potential scenarios calculated in microseconds, each one ending with a decisive Zorn victory. Their neural networks mapped out tactical approaches with quantum precision, creating intricate battle plans that accounted for every possible variable. Or so they believed. What the Zorn failed to understand was that human capability couldn't be measured by standard computational models. Their strength lay in something far more dynamic, an ability to adapt, to think beyond programmed parameters, to turn limitations into unexpected advantages. Commander Krillak studied the human carefully. Her file was maddeningly simple. No enhanced cybernetic implants, no quantum-linked combat systems. Just years of experience documented in a way that seemed almost antiquated. Training records showed multiple specializations: environmental adaptation, improvised resource management, psychological operations. The simulation parameters began to load. The barren moon materialized in exquisite detail, a landscape of potential and challenge. Gravitational anomalies created zones of unpredictability. Electromagnetic interference would scramble traditional communication and tracking systems. "The challenge is accepted," Krillak finally transmitted. His communication nodes pulsed with what might have been excitement, or something closer to anticipation. Rodriguez simply nodded. A hint of a smile played at the corner of her mouth, the kind of expression that suggested she knew something the Zorn had yet to understand. The first seeds of humanity's true nature were about to be planted in the most unexpected of battlegrounds. As the diplomatic chamber went silent, one thing became clear. This was far more than a standard conflict assessment. This was going to be a lesson in the true meaning of adaptability. The preparation room defied every standard of military readiness the Zorn had ever encountered. Scattered across multiple surfaces were objects that seemed completely unrelated to tactical preparation. Ancient paper books with dog-eared pages, geological samples, fragments of different materials, and an assortment of seemingly random technological components. Sergeant Rodriguez moved through the space with an intentionality that belied the apparent chaos. Each item had been carefully selected, each positioning deliberate. Zorn's surveillance systems struggled to parse the environment, their algorithms finding no consistent pattern, no straightforward tactical preparation. A holographic display captured her initial preparation sequence. Instead of running standard combat simulations, Rodriguez began by reviewing historical records. Not military histories alone, but comprehensive cultural studies, environmental adaptation reports, and human survival narratives from Earth's most challenging environments. She pulled up records from Antarctic research stations, documenting how humans survived months of extreme isolation, expeditions that survived by adapting, by using creativity when standard protocols failed. Next came reports from disaster response teams, individuals who transformed limited resources into life-saving solutions within moments of critical challenges. The Zorn observation team watched in growing confusion. Their tactical preparation always followed a precise, mathematically optimized path. Neural networks would calculate optimal strategies, link combat units, and create predictive models with quantum precision. Rodriguez's approach seemed like pure randomness. She began constructing what looked like a three-dimensional map, but it wasn't a standard tactical projection. Instead, it was a complex overlay of environmental data, historical survival scenarios, and seemingly unrelated technological capabilities. Geological surveys intertwined with human adaptation stories. Technological limitation reports merged with creative problem-solving examples. A small device caught her attention, a multi-tool that looked like it had survived multiple extreme environments. Rodriguez examined it carefully, her fingers tracing its modified components. To the Zorn observers, it appeared to be nothing more than a primitive survival tool. But her careful study suggested something deeper. She began modifying the device, not with advanced technological enhancements, but with a series of precise, almost intuitive adjustments. Each modification seemed to address potential environmental challenges. A reinforced connection here, an improvised sensor adaptation there. The tool was being transformed into something far more versatile than its original design. Historical records began to play in the background. Documentaries about human exploration, survival stories from various planetary environments. A narrative emerged, not of technological superiority, but of adaptability. Humans had explored and survived environments that would have destroyed other species. Rodriguez's preparation was a form of mental mapping. She wasn't just preparing for a conflict. She was building a comprehensive understanding of potential scenarios, creating mental frameworks that could adapt to unexpected challenges. The Zorn surveillance system struggled to categorize her preparation. Their tactical algorithms worked on prediction, on creating perfect, mathematically precise responses. Rodriguez was creating something far more fluid, a preparation method that embraced uncertainty. She pulled up records of previous interspecies conflicts, not to study tactical approaches, but to understand psychological dynamics. How had different species responded to unexpected challenges? What made some adaptable while others failed? A series of geological and environmental simulations began to run, but they weren't standard tactical projections. These were comprehensive environmental studies that examined every potential interaction between terrain, technology, and living systems. The preparation room began to transform. What had initially looked like chaos now revealed an intricate strategic framework, each seemingly random item connected to potential scenarios. Each modification suggested multiple potential uses. Zorn tactical analysts found themselves increasingly frustrated. Their systems could not predict her approach. Every time they believed they had identified a pattern, Rodriguez would introduce another layer of complexity. As the final preparation hours approached, something became clear. This was not standard military preparation. This was a holistic approach to problem-solving that transcended traditional tactical thinking. The Zorn observation team transmitted their findings, their communication nodes pulsing with a mixture of confusion and emerging respect. Whatever was coming would be unlike anything they had ever encountered. Sergeant Rodriguez looked up, a slight smile playing across her features. To her, preparation was not about creating the perfect plan. It was about creating the capacity to adapt to anything. The lunar landscape stretched out like a canvas of geological complexity. Electromagnetic interference created visual distortions, making the terrain shift and shimmer with an almost living quality. Gravitational anomalies created pockets of altered physics, zones where movement became unpredictable, where standard tactical approaches would fail catastrophically. The Zorn tactical unit deployed with perfect synchronization. 8 neural-linked combatants moved as a single organism, their movements calculated down to the microsecond. Quantum state sensors mapped the terrain, creating real-time adaptive models that predicted potential threats with mathematical precision. Sergeant Rodriguez's initial position appeared almost lockably exposed. She stood on a small rocky outcropping, her equipment a seemingly random collection of modified tools and compact technology. To the Zorn observers, it looked like a critical tactical error, complete vulnerability. Their neural networks began calculating potential engagement scenarios. Billions of potential outcomes processed in milliseconds, each one ending with a swift, decisive victory. The human's position seemed to violate every known principle of tactical positioning. What the Zorn didn't understand was that vulnerability was itself a strategy. Rodriguez's first movement defied all predictive models. Instead of seeking cover or initiating a defensive posture, she began to interact with the environment itself. Her handheld devices started collecting data not just about the terrain, but about the electromagnetic and gravitational anomalies that made the moon such a challenging battlefield. The Zorn tactical unit's first approach followed a perfectly calculated flanking maneuver. Their movement was a mathematical symphony, each unit positioned to create an impenetrable tactical formation. Quantum-linked communication allowed for instantaneous adjustment, their collective consciousness moving as a single, perfect entity. Rodriguez seemed to almost dance across the terrain. Her movements appeared random, but each step was carefully calculated. She used the electromagnetic interference not as a hindrance, but as a tactical advantage. Where the Zorn sensors struggled with the visual distortions, she seemed to read the landscape like a living map. A series of small devices deployed from her equipment. They weren't weapons in any traditional sense. Instead, they began to interact with the environment, creating localized sensor disruptions that made precise tracking impossible. The Zorn tactical unit found their perfect formations becoming increasingly unstable. Their neural networks began to show the first signs of tactical uncertainty. Micro-hesitations appeared in their collective movement, fractional moments of confusion that should have been impossible for a perfectly linked combat unit. Rodriguez used the terrain itself as her primary tactical resource. Rocky outcroppings became temporary shields. Gravitational anomalies became unexpected movement corridors. Where the Zorn saw obstacles, she saw opportunities. The first direct engagement happened in a moment that defied standard tactical prediction. Instead of a long-range engagement or a direct confrontation, Rodriguez managed to create a series of environmental interactions that forced the Zorn tactical unit to break their perfect formation. A small device she had deployed earlier began to interact with the moon's unique electromagnetic field. The result was a localized distortion that made precise targeting impossible. The Zorn unit's quantum-linked communication began to fragment, creating micro-delays that should have been mathematically impossible. Commander Krulax watched the simulation unfold with growing fascination. The human wasn't just fighting against the Zorn tactical unit. She was fighting the entire concept of predictable conflict. Her approach violated every known principle of tactical engagement. Movement that looked random was actually a complex series of environmental interactions. Each seemingly insignificant action was part of a larger, more intricate strategy. The Zorn tactical unit found themselves responding to threats that weren't threats, defending against attacks that weren't attacks. Their perfect, mathematically precise approach was being transformed into a state of constant uncertainty. As the first phase of the simulation concluded, one thing became abundantly clear. This was going to be nothing like what anyone had expected. The human wasn't just participating in the conflict. She was rewriting the entire understanding of what conflict could be. The simulation entered its critical phase, and the Zorn observation team found themselves in uncharted territory. Rodriguez's approach defied every computational model they had constructed. Where their tactical systems expected linear progression, she introduced pure complexity. A damaged communication device became her first unexpected weapon. Instead of discarding the compromised technology, she began to modify it in real time. The Zorn watched in growing confusion as what should have been a liability transformed into a strategic asset. The lunar terrain became a living canvas of human creativity. Rodriguez moved between geological formations with an intuition that seemed to border on precognition. Each movement told a story, not of military training, but of fundamental human survival instinct. She began broadcasting a series of signals that made no immediate tactical sense, seemingly random audio frequencies mixed with bursts of data that appeared to be nonsensical. The Zorn tactical unit's neural networks began to struggle, their perfect computational models encountering something they couldn't categorize. Communication became a weapon more potent than any energy discharge. Rodriguez understood something fundamental that the Zorn had overlooked. Conflict was not just about physical engagement, but about breaking psychological frameworks. Her modifications to standard equipment demonstrated a principle the Zorn found impossible to comprehend. Where they saw a tool with a single purpose, she saw potential for multiple applications. A standard environmental sensor became a communication disruptor. A basic cooling unit transformed into a localized sensor interference device. The Zorn tactical unit found their perfect neural links becoming increasingly unstable. Micro-hesitations began to appear in their collective consciousness. Fractional moments of uncertainty that should have been mathematically impossible for their advanced systems. Rodriguez began introducing environmental variables that challenged the very concept of predictive modeling. She used the Moon's unique geological characteristics not as a battlefield, but as an extension of her tactical approach. Gravitational anomalies became movement corridors. Electromagnetic interference transformed into a communication advantage. Her communication transmissions began to include something unexpected: historical narratives, fragments of human survival stories, accounts of overcoming seemingly impossible challenges. These weren't just communications, they were psychological warfare of the most sophisticated kind. The Zorn observation team watched their tactical models begin to fragment. Each of Rodriguez's actions created computational ripples that their systems couldn't predict. Where they expected a linear response, she introduced pure complexity. A small device began to emit a series of frequency modulations that seemed to interact with the lunar environment in ways that defied standard physics. The Zorn tactical unit found their perfectly synchronized movements becoming increasingly erratic. Commander Krulax leaned forward, his neural appendages pulsing with a mixture of frustration and emerging respect. The human wasn't just fighting against their tactical unit. She was challenging the entire concept of predictive engagement. Rodriguez used limitation as a strength. A damaged communication array became a sensor disruption tool. A compromised environmental suit became a method of thermal camouflage. Each supposed weakness transformed into an unexpected advantage. The simulation began to reveal something profound about human capabilities. It wasn't about having the most advanced technology. It was about the ability to see potential where others saw only limitation. Zorn tactical analysts found their most advanced predictive models falling apart. Their neural networks, designed to calculate millions of potential scenarios in microseconds, began to show signs of computational stress. Micro-hesitations appeared, moments of uncertainty that should have been impossible for their advanced systems. As the simulation's midpoint approached, one thing became terrifyingly clear to the Zorn observers. They were no longer watching a standard conflict assessment. They were witnessing a fundamental challenge to their understanding of strategic engagement. Rodriguez wasn't just participating in the conflict. She was rewriting the entire understanding of what conflict could be. The human had transformed the battlefield from a place of physical engagement to a complex ecosystem of psychological and technological adaptation. Every moment challenged the Zorn's fundamental understanding of strategic interaction. Somewhere in the complex dance of technology, environment, and human creativity, the very nature of conflict was being redefined. The communication channel opened with a clarity that caught the Zorn completely off guard. Rodriguez wasn't just transmitting tactical information. She was sharing stories. Complex narratives that transformed the entire context of the conflict began to flood the Zorn's communication networks. First came accounts of human exploration, not the sanitized historical records typically shared between species, but raw, unfiltered stories of survival. Tales of expeditions that survived impossible conditions. Narratives of individuals who transformed seemingly fatal limitations into extraordinary achievements. A story about Antarctic researchers trapped for months in extreme isolation began to play. The Zorn tactical systems struggled to categorize the transmission. Was this a distraction? A psychological warfare technique? Their neural networks couldn't parse the seemingly irrelevant information. Rodriguez understood something fundamental about communication that the Zorn had never conceived. Information was not just about data transmission. It was about creating understanding, building context, revealing the deeper layers of adaptation and survival. She shared the story of a medical team that developed innovative treatments using limited resources, a group of researchers who created life-saving technologies from what appeared to be nothing more than basic components. Each narrative was a lesson in human creativity, the ability to see potential where others saw only limitation. The Zorn observation team found their tactical systems becoming increasingly confused. These weren't standard communication protocols. This was something far more complex, a form of communication that transcended traditional information exchange. Geological surveys began to intertwine with human survival narratives. Rodriguez demonstrated how understanding environment was not just about physical mapping, but about comprehending complex ecological interactions. She showed how humans approached challenges not as fixed problems, but as dynamic systems of potential adaptation. Commander Krulax watched the transmission with growing fascination. The human was doing something unprecedented. She was transforming the entire concept of interspecies communication. Each story was a strategic element, each narrative a potential tactical approach. The stories revealed a fundamental truth about human capability. Survival was not about having the most advanced technology. It was about the ability to understand, adapt, and transform challenges into opportunities. A transmission about space exploration missions illustrated this perfectly. Humans had sent exploratory vehicles to distant planets with technology that was deliberately designed to be modifiable. Each mission carried the potential for unexpected adaptation. Rovers designed to function in one environment could be reprogrammed to survive in completely different conditions. The Zorn tactical systems began to show signs of genuine confusion. Their neural networks were designed to process information with mathematical precision. Rodriguez was introducing something that defied standard computational models, a form of strategic thinking that was inherently dynamic and unpredictable. She began to explain the human concept of ethical constraints in conflict. This was not a limitation, as the Zorn initially believed, but a sophisticated form of strategic thinking. Ethical considerations were not separate from tactical approach. They were an integral part of problem solving. Detailed accounts of humanitarian missions began to string through. Scenarios where humans had solved complex challenges by prioritizing collective survival over individual tactical advantages. The Zorn found themselves confronting a completely different understanding of strategic engagement. Rodriguez demonstrated how human creativity emerged from limitation. Resource scarcity became an opportunity for innovation. Technological constraints transformed into chances for revolutionary problem-solving. Each story was a lesson in the art of adaptation. The communication channel became a complex ecosystem of information. not a linear transmission, but a multidimensional sharing of understanding. The Zorn realized they were experiencing something far more profound than a standard conflict assessment. As the transmission continued, a fundamental question emerged. What if conflict was not about defeating an opponent, but about understanding the deepest potential of collective survival? The human had transformed communication from a tactical tool into a method of profound mutual understanding. In that moment, the Zorn began to understand that they were witnessing something far beyond a simple simulation. They were seeing a fundamental reimagining of what intelligent species could be. The simulation entered its most critical phase, and the lunar landscape became a canvas of unprecedented strategic complexity. Rodriguez's approach had transformed the entire concept of tactical engagement, leaving the Zorn tactical systems in a state of complete computational breakdown. Their neural networks, once a perfect symphony of predictive calculations, now resembled a system under extreme stress. Micro-hesitations turned into full-scale algorithmic uncertainties. The perfectly synchronized Zorn tactical unit found themselves responding to threats that weren't threats, defending against attacks that weren't attacks. Rodriguez moved through the electromagnetic interference with an intuition that defied computational understanding. Each movement was a complex calculation that went beyond mathematical precision. It was a living, breathing strategy that adapted in real time. The modified devices she had deployed earlier began to create a full-scale disruption of the Zorn's tactical framework. Localized sensor interference combined with carefully positioned environmental interactions to create zones of complete tactical uncertainty. The Zorn found their quantum-linked communication fragmenting in ways that should have been mathematically impossible. Commander Krillak watched in growing fascination and horror. The human wasn't just defeating their tactical unit. She was systematically dismantling their entire understanding of strategic engagement. Each of Rodriguez's actions created ripple effects that their systems couldn't predict. A damaged communication device became a sensor disruption tool. A basic environmental analyzer transformed into a communication interference device. Where the Zorn saw individual pieces of technology, she saw an interconnected ecosystem of potential. The lunar terrain itself became a weapon. Gravitational anomalies that should have been a hindrance became movement corridors. Electromagnetic interference transformed from a challenge into a tactical advantage. Rodriguez demonstrated a fundamental truth about human capabilities: the ability to see potential where others saw only limitation. Zorn tactical analysts found their most advanced predictive models collapsing. Billions of calculated scenarios became meaningless in the face of human unpredictability. Their neural networks, designed to process information with quantum-level precision, began to show signs of genuine confusion. Rodriguez began to introduce variables that completely defied their understanding of conflict. She used the environment not as a battlefield, but as an extension of her tactical approach. Rocky outcroppings became communication relays. Electromagnetic distortions became methods of tactical misdirection. The Zorn tactical unit's collective consciousness began to fragment. Micro-hesitations turned into full-scale computational uncertainties. Their perfect formation, once a mathematically precise movement of collective consciousness, began to break down in ways that should have been impossible for their advanced systems. Commander Krillak leaned forward, his neural appendages pulsing with a mixture of frustration and emerging respect. The human had transformed the entire concept of tactical engagement. She wasn't just fighting against their tactical unit. She was challenging the fundamental principles of strategic interaction. As the simulation approached its final moments, the Zorn found themselves in a state of complete tactical disarray. Their quantum-linked communication systems began to show signs of genuine breakdown. Perfectly synchronized movements became increasingly erratic. Rodriguez demonstrated a principle that went beyond technological capability. It was about the ability to see potential where others saw only limitation. Each supposed weakness became an unexpected strength. A compromised environmental sensor became a communication disruptor. A damaged cooling unit transformed into a localized interference device. The lunar landscape became a testament to human creativity. Where the Zorn saw obstacles, Rodriguez saw opportunities. Gravitational anomalies became movement corridors. Electromagnetic interference transformed into a complex communication network. In the final moments of the simulation, the Zorn tactical unit found themselves completely overwhelmed. Their neural networks, once a perfect computational system, now resembled a fragmented collection of uncertain responses. Commander Krillax realized they were witnessing something far more profound than a simple conflict assessment. This was a fundamental challenge to their understanding of strategic engagement. The human had done more than win a simulation. She had rewritten the entire understanding of what conflict could be. As the simulation concluded, one thing became terrifyingly clear. Humanity represented something far beyond a simple emerging species. They were a force of pure, unbridled adaptive potential. The diplomatic chamber fell silent as the simulation's final data streams filtered through the Zorn's advanced communication networks. What had begun as a routine first contact assessment had transformed into something far more profound, a fundamental reimagining of intelligent species potential. Commander Krillax's neural appendages pulsed with a complex mixture of emotions that their species had never before experienced. Respect, confusion, a deep, unsettling recognition of something entirely new. Rodriguez stood at the center of the chamber, her posture relaxed yet alert. She wasn't celebrating a victory. She was waiting. An invitation for understanding that went far beyond the simple concept of conflict. The Zorn diplomatic corps began to analyze the simulation data. But traditional analysis failed. Their most advanced computational systems struggled to categorize what had occurred. Rodriguez hadn't just defeated a tactical unit. She had demonstrated a completely different approach to problem solving, to survival, to interaction. Holographic displays began to reconstruct the simulation, revealing layers of complexity that defied their previous understanding. Each moment of Rodriguez's approach showed something fundamental about human capability. Limitations were not obstacles. They were opportunities. Challenges were not problems to be solved. They were ecosystems to be understood and transformed. Your approach defies our computational models. Senior strategist Plex could transmit it, her communication nodes vibrating with a mixture of frustration and genuine curiosity. Rodriguez simply smiled. Computation is not understanding, she responded. Adaptation is not just about technology. It's about perspective. The Zorn began to understand that what they had witnessed was more than a military simulation. It was a profound lesson in the nature of intelligent problem-solving. Humans didn't see the world as a series of fixed parameters. They saw it as a dynamic, constantly changing system of potential. Fragments of the stories Rodriguez had shared during the simulation continued to resonate through their communication networks. Tales of human exploration, of survival, of transformation. Each narrative revealed a fundamental truth about human capability that the Zorn had never conceived. Commander Krillax realized they were experiencing a complete paradigm shift. The human wasn't just presenting a different approach to conflict. She was revealing an entirely new way of understanding intelligent interaction. The diplomatic chamber began to fill with a series of holographic reconstructions, not just of the simulation, but of human historical achievements. Exploration missions that survived against impossible odds, scientific discoveries born from limited resources, medical innovations created through pure creative thinking. Rodriguez represented something far more than a single tactical operator. She was a living demonstration of human potential, the ability to see beyond current limitations, to transform challenges into opportunities. The Zorn diplomatic corps found themselves confronting a fundamental question. What did intelligence truly mean? Was it about computational precision, or about the ability to adapt, to understand, to transform? "We underestimated your species," Commander Krillax finally transmitted. The words carried a weight of genuine recognition. Rodriguez's response was simple and profound. "Every species has potential," she said. "The key is learning to see it." The simulation data continued to be analyzed, but traditional methods failed. What the Zorn were experiencing wasn't just a tactical assessment. It was a complete reimagining of what intelligent interaction could be. Humanity represented something entirely new in the galactic ecosystem. Not a species defined by technological advancement, but by the ability to adapt, to transform, to see potential where others saw only limitation. As the diplomatic chamber hummed with the energy of new understanding, one thing became clear. This was not an ending. This was a beginning. The stars outside seemed to shimmer with a new possibility, a recognition that the universe was far more complex, far more wonderful than any single species could ever fully comprehend. Somewhere between computation and creativity, between limitation and potential, humanity had found its true place among the stars.